The meal on the table, the warm tea, the cat sleeping undisturbed on the bunk. For over a century, these details have anchored the story of the Mary Celeste, printed in encyclopedias, repeated in documentaries, taught as fact. None of them were there. A writer invented them 12 years after the ship was found, and the world believed him. But here is the part that should unsettle you. The real ship, the one in the actual salvage record, was far stranger than anything he made up. Welcome to the grim archive. Tonight's file, the Mary Celeste. November 1872, the port of New York. The brigantine Mary Celeste, sometimes spelled Marie Celeste, though that version came later, was loaded with commercial cargo, 1,701 barrels of denatured industrial alcohol, bound for Genoa, Italy. The ship was not glamorous. It was a working vessel, 103 feet long, built in Nova Scotia a decade earlier. It had already changed hands several times. Its first voyage, in 1861, had ended in a grounding. The ship carried a reputation some sailors found uncomfortable. Others called that superstition. They were wrong to dismiss it. The captain was Benjamin Briggs, 47 years old, a deeply religious man from Massachusetts, experienced and well-regarded. This was his third command. What made this voyage different was who he brought with him, his wife, Sarah Elizabeth Briggs, their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda. Their 7-year-old son, Arthur, stayed home in Massachusetts to attend school. Sarah wrote a letter to her mother-in-law the day before departure. She described the crew as promising. She said she looked forward to a pleasant voyage. That letter is the last confirmed record of her voice. The Mary Celeste departed New York on November 7, 1872. The crew numbered 7 men, plus Briggs, his wife, and the child. 10 people total. The first mate of another ship, the Dei Gratia, later testified that Briggs was a man he trusted. They had dined together just days before departure. The Dei Gratia left New York 8 days later, following a similar Atlantic route toward Gibraltar. On December 4, 1872, the Dei Gratia's helmsman spotted a vessel approximately 600 miles west of Portugal. It was moving erratically. Something was wrong. The Dei Gratia's captain, David Morehouse, recognized the Mary Celeste. He watched her for 2 hours before sending a boarding party. 3 men rowed across. What they found was a ship in reasonable condition. Sails partially set, some damaged, the helm unmanned. No one answered their calls. They searched below. The cargo was largely intact. The crew's personal belongings remained. Food stores were present. But the ship's chronometer and sextant, the 2 instruments essential for knowing where you are on open ocean, were gone. The ship's only lifeboat was also missing. The crew had left. But why? The salvage hearing was held in Gibraltar in December 1872. The Admiralty's advocate, Frederick Solly Flood, was a man inclined toward suspicion. He examined the ship closely and found what he believed was evidence of violence. A sword with reddish staining, marks on the railing he described as cuts made by an axe. He suspected mutiny. He suspected murder. Later chemical analysis found no blood on the sword. The marks were never conclusively explained. Flood's theory collapsed, but his suspicion had poisoned the proceedings. Morehouse and his crew received a salvage award significantly below what they were owed. The official record closed without a verdict. 12 years passed. In 1884, a young writer named Arthur Conan Doyle published a short story in Cornhill magazine. It was titled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. It was fiction, presented as fiction. But Doyle borrowed the real ship's name, changed it slightly to Marie Celeste, and filled it with invented imagery. A half-eaten breakfast, warm tea, a cat undisturbed in its sleep, a ship that seemed to have been abandoned mid-moment, without warning or reason. The story was vivid, it was well written, and it was almost immediately mistaken for a genuine account. Even the Gibraltar authorities reportedly believed it referred to real testimony. Here is what the actual salvage record shows, and does not show. No food on the table, no tea, no cat. The ship's log ended on November 25th, 9 days before she was found. The last entry placed her near the Azores. There were no signs of panic in the crew's quarters. Belongings were left behind, but not scattered. The boarding party described the scene as orderly, not chaotic. This is the profile of a controlled abandonment. People who made a decision, gathered specific items, and left deliberately. Someone chose to take the chronometer and sextant. Someone chose to leave everything else. That choice has never been explained. Consider the cargo, 1,700 barrels of raw industrial alcohol. 9 of those barrels, when inspected in Genoa, were found to be made of red oak rather than white oak, a wood known to be more porous. Red oak barrels leak. They seep vapor. In a sealed cargo hold, that vapor accumulates. It does not ignite easily, but it displaces oxygen. It builds pressure. It creates the sensation, some researchers have argued, of an impending explosion, even when none occurs. A captain who smelled that hold, who saw those barrels weeping alcohol into the bilge, might have made a rational decision. He might have ordered everyone into the lifeboat to wait at a safe distance. The lifeboat theory, sometimes called the vapor hypothesis, is not confirmed. It is the most evidence-consistent explanation available, and it has the weight of maritime historians and researchers behind it. But it requires a second tragedy. The lifeboat itself was never found. A tow rope trailed behind the Mary Celeste when she was boarded. If Briggs had ordered the crew to follow at a safe distance on a line, and that line snapped in Atlantic weather. 10 people in an open boat, hundreds of miles from land, in December. Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, the crew, gone. No wreckage, no bodies, no record. Doyle's story spread. Over the following decades, the invented details migrated from fiction into journalism. By the early 20th century, newspapers were reporting the warm meals and sleeping cat as established fact. Encyclopedias repeated them. A 1935 film starring Marlene Dietrich and Charles Laughton cemented the mythology further. Each retelling buried the real evidence a little deeper. The genuine question, why did a careful, experienced captain abandon a seaworthy ship with his family aboard, was replaced by a more comfortable mystery. One with no answer, because the answer was never meant to exist. It was invented. And invention is easier to repeat than truth. The Mary Celeste was eventually run aground in Haiti in 1885, deliberately, in an insurance fraud scheme, by a later owner. She was salvaged, barely. She was abandoned again. What remained of her rotted into the Caribbean seafloor and was not positively identified until 2001. Benjamin Briggs, Sarah Briggs, Sophia Matilda, 2 years old, are listed as lost at sea, cause unknown. The real archive does not offer resolution. It offers evidence, silence, and the shape of a question no one has answered. A writer filled that silence with a story. The world preferred the story. The next story begins where another silence ends. The archive is always open.